So on that note, I'd like to maybe specifically look a little bit more at, talk a little bit more about Bangladesh in particular. Bangladesh, as we heard, has an incredible beauty, diversity, fulfills an amazingly important role environmentally as a filter. A lot of Bangladesh is a river delta, and the river delta is incredibly important because it really cleans out and filters the air and provides an incredible amount of habitat for flora and fauna. Maybe if we could go to the poster. Yes, Ambassador Munan and I were talking earlier about how difficult it is to really rely on second-party knowledge, or third-party knowledge about a place. And unfortunately, I was not able to bring my whole class of 45 students from Santa Cruz to Bangladesh to work on this project. However, we applied a lot of interesting techniques, and this poster kind of outlines kind of a broad spectrum of some of the approaches that were being applied in our process. And yes, on that note, I'd like to hand over the microphone to Brendan, who will go into one or two of these projects in more detail.
Do we want to zoom in on sun right now?
Sure, yeah. If you could, sorry. Yeah. So, here I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the examples, some of the approaches that the students were using to go about. Bangladesh has quite a bit of flooding, potential for flooding. So there were a few concepts of floating structures, houses that would float in the case of flooding. Projects that incorporated water. In this case, it was a project that was overflowing with water. A waterfall house. Several projects started with a look at transportation and how you could lay out a transportation network for the master planning process. And several people kind of looked in more detail at nodes of connection and where the community people would be coming together. Maybe could you pan to the right here? Yeah, thank you. Awesome. So here we see a model of Brendan's group project, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. Pan a little more. This was an interesting project that actually looked at the cross-section of a blade of rice and looked at the distribution of kind of positive and negative space, and went about and kind of designed a city kind of on that topic. So maybe if we could maybe pan over to the left. Thank you. So here we have kind of an example of a development in several different phases. This team looked at kind of the honeycomb patterns of how bees assemble their structures, and a modular type of a system was proposed for urban development that would kind of bring together a larger area. This project looked at basically designing a water infrastructure as the first element of the design process, and basically designing the city, a large city in Bangladesh, around a water catchment system for electricity and also for other uses. And this is Brendan's group, and I'll pass the mic over to him then, and he can go into his project in a little more detail.
Can I change slides on this?
Yes, you can. Thank you, Thomas.
All right, so Visions of Bangladesh was the title of the project that we were working on. It was called Green Building Design Course. That was Thomas's course.
That's fine. Yep, please go ahead.
It was offered by the Environmental Studies Department at my university. We were given an area in Bangladesh to sort of try to solve the challenges.
You come here,
Yeah.
because this microphone is big.
Okay.
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah. Right on. Okay, so yeah, we were given an area in Bangladesh, and we were given this opportunity to try to solve the challenges that Bangladesh faces. We found that the number one problem is population density. It was the highest in the world. And then the next was lack of stable housing and agriculture due to flooding and natural disasters. Yes, okay, so there were several approaches to the project. We chose three that were most relevant. Thomas talked about the beehive example. It was a way to build community and have people congregate in the streets around these hexagonal modules, basically. It was a social solution, and they had an interesting idea for traffic regulation, where the streets would be shared with automobiles. I don't know how practical it was, but it was a good idea. The next was an infrastructural approach. The transportation approach was basically modeled around a magnetic levitation train system that would use zero outside energy. Basically, it would be run by repulsion of magnets. The technology is being used in Japan. It's interesting. I don't know how relevant it is to Bangladesh right now, but maybe in the future. Another one was waterways that would basically collect the floodwater so that the farmland was available for farming, and it would save homes from being washed away, and the water could be reused. The next is a idealistic approach. This is the approach that my group went with. It's a bit different. We saw it as a step forward rather than a step sideways. So instead of avoiding a problem, we wanted to overcome the problem. This is an example of something called vertical farming. Professor Dixon Dupamier at Columbia University in New York came up with this idea with his students. It's gotten a lot of criticism, but basically it's farming upwards so that you don't take up land. And with Bangladesh, there's a shortage of land because of so many people. So this was an idea. The advantages basically are year-round crop production. There's no weather-related failures due to droughts, floods, or pests, because all of the plants and all of the agriculture is inside and raised above the ground. It's interesting, 1 indoor acre is equivalent to 4 to 6 outdoor acres or more, depending on the crop. For example, with strawberries, 1 indoor acre equals 30 outdoor acres, so you can yield a lot more crops in a smaller space. Also, all vertical farm food is grown organically. There's no harm to the environment from pesticides or fertilizers. It virtually eliminates agricultural runoff by recycling the water and using rainwater catchment. Thomas talked about this. and it dramatically reduces fossil fuels because you don't have to use tractors or plows for the ground, and you don't have to transport the food because it's local. Yes, okay, so that is the idealistic approach. And this is our project. As a student of psychology, I was working on my thesis, my senior thesis, which was the psychology of peaceful relations. And really briefly, there's three fundamental aspects of peace: peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. Peacekeeping is basically separating conflicting groups and keeping them at peace. You have said that this is being done right now. Peacemaking is a proactive process of interacting with groups and finding common goals, resources, these kinds of things. And finally, peace building is a process that attempts to build economic and social stability to avoid conflict or avoid a relapse back into conflict. And conflict and peace, when I talk about this, not only includes war, but also internal conflict. If the people of a community or a nation are not, if they don't have a sense of well-being and safety, then they're not at peace. Very simply, this peace comes from a stable income of food, water, and shelter. And this is where architecture and the psychology of peace seemingly sync together. If they have a safe place to live and they're not worried, then this is a peaceful situation for them. So, going on, in Bangladesh there is a lack of resources in water, land, and housing. Very simply, this isn't peaceful. So, in the future, there are also problems relating to climate change. You talked about this, Ambassador. It's a real problem. In the next 40 to 50 years, sea levels are supposed to rise 10 to 20 meters. And as you can see, Bangladesh would be really devastated by this. So things need to be done. Vertical farming is one option, and in order to make this work, we propose an idea of not only having vertical farms, but also having vertical farms that people could live in and work in, so basically live-work spaces. That would hopefully do something to ease the problem. Now this was our proposal for a city. I'm not an architect, but so my drawings and my things aren't as nice as promises. But Columbus City is just a name. It's just a filler, basically. It wouldn't be called Columbus City. We were asked to come up with something that was inspirational to us, and we chose the water lily, which is the national flower of Bangladesh, I believe. And it's a very resilient flower, so it can go through a lot of hard times, basically. So this is to show a sense of success and safety inside of the city. It was modeled after the Lotus Temple in India. So I guess this would be the Lily Temple or whatever. And then the towers that you see are vertical farm spaces that could be used for business or for living. This is another view. Obviously, this is way in the future where things would be developed and it's very conceptual, but you can get an idea. And the staggered design of the buildings allows for light to reach the different levels of crops. Yes. And then wetlands would be surrounding the temple. Basically, this would allow for rainwater and floodwater to collect instead of traveling to different places and flooding the landscape. The different approaches that we took in the class could all be used together to form a solution that would work in a whole. But basically, we all separated into groups of 3 or 4 and came up with ideas. So, yeah. And like you said, visions are always dreams. So this is a dream, and thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure to present this to you. Yeah.
Thank you both, Brendan and Thomas. I think you're absolutely right. We're here at the moment trying to initiate a dream and initiate a vision. And once you have a very big vision, then you can motivate smaller groups and other institutions and a broad group of people to work in separate ways to sort of achieve their vision. It may be a bit futuristic, but it's a step